This message is for you. They watched you take that final stand, expecting carnage, expecting drama, expecting you to go down swinging with rage and desperation. But you didn't swing wildly. You didn't scream into the void. Didn't give them the satisfaction of watching you crumble. You moved with surgical precision, with calculated silence, with the composure that made their confidence evaporate in real time. Every word you spoke was a landmine. Every gesture, a carefully placed piece on a board that they didn't even know they were playing on. You weren't defending yourself anymore. You were teaching them a lesson that they will carry to their graves. And the most terrifying part for them is that you weren't angry. You were clear. And clarity is the most dangerous weapon on earth because rage can be manipulated. Desperation can be exploited. But clarity cuts through everything. And now they're in conference rooms trying to explain to superiors how one person who was supposedly defeated, supposedly finished, supposedly broken beyond repair, managed to execute a strategic withdrawal that looked like surrender but was actually a complete dismantling of their entire operation. They're replaying your moves frame by frame like it's game film because they need to understand how you turned their victory into your legend. They're studying your decision-making under pressure because you demonstrated something that they've spent years trying to teach. Their intelligence division has your case file labeled as priority research because you embody principles of psychological operations that they've been perfecting for decades. You became the standard without even trying, the blueprint without asking for permission. You became the case study that they'll reference for generations. And let's talk about what you actually did because this is where it gets beautiful. When they closed in expecting submission, you gave them something far more unsettling. You gave them acknowledgement without apology, truth without defense, acceptance without defeat. You looked at everything they built against you, every accusation, every betrayal, every calculated attack designed to make you small, and you didn't argue with it. You didn't fight their narrative. You didn't waste energy proving them wrong. You didn't scramble to salvage your reputation in their eyes. You simply stepped outside the entire framework they constructed and watched it collapse under its own weight. Because the moment you stopped feeding it, stopped resisting it, stopped giving it your energy, the whole operation lost its purpose. They needed you to fight back because your resistance was the fuel that justified their aggression. They needed you to defend yourself because your explanations would give them more ammunition. They needed you to break publicly because your breakdown would validate every lie that they told about you. But you didn't give them any of it because somewhere in that corner they backed you into, you found something more or that they didn't expect. You found peace with the truth, comfort in your own skin, and power in your silence. And that shift, that internal transformation from victim to observer, from defendant to witness, from player to architect, that's what shattered their entire psychological framework. They built a prison designed for someone who still needed their approval, and you showed up already free. Psychologists are studying this because you demonstrated a principle that they teach but rarely see executed perfectly under real pressure. When surrounded, when outnumbered, when outgunned, when the enemy has every advantage, the most devastating response isn't aggression or surrender, it's transformation. You transformed the battlefield itself by refusing to acknowledge their definition of victory or defeat. You changed the rules mid-game, not by announcing it, not by fighting for it, but by simply operating from a completely different paradigm. They were playing checkers thinking they mastered the board, and you revealed you've been playing three-dimensional chess in a game that they didn't even know that existed. They respect this because it's exactly what their most effective operators do in the field. They win without the enemy even realizing they've lost until it's far too late. Your last stand wasn't a stand at all. It was an elevation. While they were focused on breaking you down, you were ascending past their entire perception of reality. While they celebrated cornering you, you were already operating from a dimension that they couldn't access. While they thought they controlled the narrative, you were writing an entirely different story that they weren't even significant characters in anymore. just background noise in a transformation that they couldn't comprehend. And now they're stuck with the aftermath, stuck explaining to themselves how they lost so completely while appearing to win, stuck with the haunting realization that you're not just ahead of them anymore, but you're beyond them entirely, operating on frequencies that they don't have equipment to detect, moving through spaces that they don't have maps for, building realities that they don't have language to describe. They don't teach your story because it's inspiring. They teach it because it's tactically flawless. Let's break down what you did in military terms, because this is where the professionals get really uncomfortable. You executed what's called a strategic retreat with simultaneous reframing of victory conditions. In simpler terms, you left the battlefield while making everyone question what the battlefield even was. You withdrew from engagement while making them realize that they weren't in control in the engagement parameters. You surrendered ground that they thought was valuable while claiming territory that they didn't even know existed. This is advanced level strategic thinking that most trained officers never master because it requires something textbooks can't teach. It requires you to fundamentally not care about winning the game that everyone else is playing because you've already decided that that game is irrelevant to your actual objectives. They wanted to see you fight for your reputation because your reputation was the battlefield that they had chosen. They wanted you to scramble to salvage relationships because the relationships were the resources that they decided were valuable. They wanted you to defend your character because your character was the objective that they targeted. But you looked at all of it: your reputation, your relationships, the character assassination, and you made a decision that military strategists call brilliant and civilians call crazy. You decided none of it mattered, not because you were defeated, but because you'd already secured what actually mattered: your internal sense of truth, the understanding of your own worth, the clarity about who you were versus who they needed you to be for their narrative to work. You protected the actual objective while letting them celebrate capturing meaningless territory, and by the time they realized you were done, you were already fortified in a position that they couldn't reach or attack. The criminalists are fascinated because you demonstrated a principle from their playbook without ever studying it. When you can't win the war your enemy has declared, you redefine what winning means, and you fight a completely different war. You can't match their resources, so you make resources irrelevant to victory. You can't compete in their arena, so you built an entirely new arena where it means nothing. They had social proof, you had self-acknowledgement. They had consensus reality, but you had personal truth. And in that exchange, you came out wealthier than they could possibly calculate. Because what you gained was permanent, while everything they celebrated was temporary, fragile, and dependent on maintaining illusions that you'd already seen through and walked away from without ever looking back to see if they'd noticed. Keep going. What's up with it, fam? I appreciate the love and the support, man. If you want to further support, grab you one of these, man. We got multiple colors. Link in the bio. I appreciate it. I'm out.